omniscient and almighty, starting with the elderly wolf uncle chapter 3. Damn, he's an ordinary person, you guys let him go. Logan. Hawlett clenched his fists and forcibly endured the brutal bestiality in his heart. He is no longer a superhero, he can no longer punish evil and promote good, he can no longer save other people, but he does not want to implicate an ordinary person because of his own problems. Shut up, what the hell are you, a monster? Quote, I thought that mutants all over the world were extinct, but I didn't expect that there were rats like you in the world, hiding in the shadows all day to survive. Isn't it tired to live? Why not end the pain earlier? Old Motu held a gun in each hand, aimed at people in 2 different directions, and turned his head to look at the embarrassed mutant on the ground, his eyes full of disgust. It's a pity that social scum like you is still alive. How can Wolverine, as the former X-Men, die so easily? Compared to him, I think some people should have cut themselves off earlier. At this moment, Chen Tian, a young man standing not far from the opposite side, unexpectedly spoke, his tone full of awe and contempt. From the words, it is clear that 2 different emotions correspond to different people. Uncle Wolf heard the code name that no one had called for a long time. He looked at the boy stunned, and a wry smile was outlined at the corner of his mouth. It seemed that this little guy really knew himself. Unexpectedly, there are still people who recognize Wolverine in this era. Shut up. When the old inkhead heard this, he looked angrily at Chen Tian, who did not know whether he was dead or alive, as if he might pull the trigger at any time. But he couldn't help but be stunned by what the young man said. Then he turned his head and looked closely at Logan on the ground. Hawlett seemed to recognize him, with a look of sudden realization. Holy crap, I recognize you, Wolverine. When I was a child, I often read the comics of X Academy. Are you all so old? Even the iconic steel claws can't be fully stretched now. Old Motu and several people around him looked at the unbearable wolf uncle on the ground with a look of embarrassment. Immediately, a hint of teasing suddenly rose in the eyes of the old inkhead, and his voice was a little strange. Wolverine, can you still fight crime now? What do you mean by that? Uncle Wolf smelled the dangerous breath, slowly raised his beastly eyes, stared at the Mexican in front of him, and his mouth seemed to tear it off in the next second. Calm down. The old inkhead signaled the person to step back step by step. He knew that Uncle Wolf was hindered by Chen Tian's safety, and he would not make any radical moves at all. But Uncle Wolf won't, doesn't mean he won't. When Lao Mo's head withdrew nearly 10 meters with his subordinates, his eyes were fierce, he pulled the trigger sharply, and in an instant, the muzzle of the shotgun flashed with fire. And a bullet shot at the brain door of Uncle Wolf and Chen Tian at the same time. Bang! Phew! Facing the speeding bullets of Logan, Hawlett reflexed, vigorously raised his hand to cut off the bullet with Edmund's steel claw, just when he looked in Chen Tian's direction. His pupils suddenly contracted, endless bloodshot madly crawled all over his eyes, and his eyes gradually became extremely hideous and terrifying, like a beast that gradually broke free. Because he saw Chen Tian being shot through the brain, and then the thin boy fell to the ground in response. Next second, the bestiality in the heart of the elderly wolf uncle completely exploded, his open arms showed a strong figure. And his whole person rushed towards the group of old ink like a fierce beast on both feet. Fack, shoot quickly, quote. The old ink head miscalculated, he thought that he could penetrate the other party's head with one shot, but he didn't expect that the seemingly old Wolverine could even cut off the bullet. This time, however, he didn't even have a chance to react, and the wolf uncle who burst out with full strength was not at all what ordinary humans could stop, facing steel claws that cut iron like mud. And powerful superpower. Within seconds, several people's heads fell to the ground and fell into pools of blood. Only the 2 people standing near Lao Mo's van was spared because of the distance. However, when they saw the furious Wolverine, their legs were already weak in fright, and they ran towards the van in horror, but just as they passed Chen Tian's corpse. Chen Tian, who had originally fallen to the ground, suddenly stretched out a hand to them. Chapter 04. Dimensional teleportation, incredible. Phew. The 2 surviving old Mo witnessed the brutality of Uncle Wolf, their faces were pale and desperate, and they strode towards the van, not noticing the yellow-skinned boy at their feet. Their fingers trembling slightly. Next second, Chen Tian, who had originally fallen in a pool of blood, suddenly stretched out his hand to the 2 old Mo who fled, grabbed the ankles of the 2 hard, and then pulled them back. Bang! Fack! The 2 did not even have a chance to resist, they only felt that their ankles were dragged, and the whole person immediately fell face to the ground, and severe pain came from their faces. The sudden situation made them a little dizzy, and they couldn't care about the sharp pain on their faces, and turned their heads to look back, but when they saw the figure slowly standing up, an unprecedented sense of fear quickly occupied their minds, and then their throats seemed to be stuck in death, and they couldn't breathe. Because what came into view was Chen Tian, who was penetrated through the brain door, and there were hideous bullet holes on his brain door, and blood and unknown liquid flowed out of the blood hole. The viscous liquid stained the boy's immature face, making him look terrifying, revealing a strange aura. How is it possible? One of the old ink trembled. If he was shot and did not die, then the only possibility is that the teenager in front of him is also a mutant and has an extremely perverted ability to heal himself. Soon, the idea in my heart was confirmed again. I saw that the blood hole on Chen Tian's brain door began to squirm, and the bullet stuck in the brain door squeezed out, and then gradually fused, recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. If it weren't for the bloodstain, no one could have imagined the tragic scene of the teenager. What? Logan. Howlett killed a few people in a row, a little breathless, not planning to chase the remaining 2. As a result, he saw Chen Tian come to life. Even the blood hole on his head has been restored as before, which means that this little guy is a mutant. How can it be? There hasn't been a newborn mutant in the world for more than 20 years, and Chen Tian is only 17 or 8 years old. The appearance of the young mutant shocked Uncle Wolf. But this was not what shocked Uncle Wolf the most, but he smelled a familiar aura on Chen Tian, especially when the bullet hole in the young man's head healed. As if he saw his young figure in the other party. When Uncle Wolf was in a trance, a heart-rending scream sounded in his ears. I saw the two old Mo who were originally lying on the ground. Their eyes suddenly turned fierce, their foreheads were bruised, their faces were twisted in pain. And their legs were twitching and their legs were swinging wildly. Then their eyes spilled blood, and their mouths foamed at the mouth. In the end, his eyes rolled and his head tilted and he completely lost his breath. This. Logan. Howlett was stunned when he saw this. The situation seemed to be different from what he thought. This little guy seemed to have other mutant abilities. Phew. On the other side, Chen Tian kicked the two of them each, making sure that there was no breath before he breathed a sigh of relief. He had just used his innate mutant ability to control the moisture in the two of them, causing them to suffocate. After all, he only got Uncle Wolf's self-healing factor, and his strength was not improved, not as fast as this move. Chen Tian couldn't help but touch the door of his brain, but after touching it, he didn't find the slightest trace, and he didn't feel a lot of emotion in his heart. Who the hell are you? At this time, Logan. Howlett came over and wondered. As you can see, a teenage mutant. Chen Tian responded while wiping the blood from his face. But this, how is it possible? You are Logan. When Howlett heard the answer, he still had a puzzled look on his face. I understand you, but I was indeed born through normal birth, not through some technological means. Chen Tian could see the concerns in Uncle Wolf's heart. After all, there have been more than 20 years in this world, and no new mutants have been born. The reason is that humans have mastered the code of mutant genes and intervened to modify and treat mutant genes through dietary injections. Actually, in the ending of Wolverine 3, scientists told Logan that all of the food over the years had been injected with a substance that could alter the genes of mutants. So let the mutants begin to weaken or even die, and no new mutants will be born. Incredibly, no wonder Charles talks about new mutants all day. Logan. Howlett listened thoughtfully, and then looked at the yellow-skinned boy with a wry smile on his lips. You were estimated to be the last newborn in the old era. And that was more than 10 years ago. Quote, but it's sad that God made you come down and suffer. Saying that, he shook his head again with self-deprecation. First chapter previous chapter 3 186 next chapter end table of